Today we're going to look at some of the flexible elite of the chapter and see what we can do with the small and interesting unit that are the company veterans. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we try and get the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. Today we're back for another Codex Space Marines datasheet review, where we'll be seeing all the best ways that we can use company veterans in our games, and can be an interesting alternative to Stern Guards or Vanguards. These guys represent small squads of generic veterans. They used to be a bit more of a thing back when you didn't have Stern Guard or Vanguard variants, but now they're mainly there to represent the other miniatures that are in the command squad box, meaning that we still have access to a nice, flexible, small veterans unit. In this video we'll take a look at their datasheet, any obvious buffs or synergies on the tabletop, and a few ideas for how they might be run in a strong Space Marine army. In the background, the veteran Space Marines are typically from the chapter's first company, or serve as command squads in the chapter's other formations. They will often serve as a captain's bodyguard or elite strike forces loaded in drop pods, ready to be deployed wherever the line should falter. The chapter armory is open to these veterans, allowing them to select the kit that is best suited for the task in hand. They can be armed with anything from bolters and ranged weapons to power weapons and storm shields. So let's see what these guys can do in game. The company veterans are an elite choice for Codex Space Marines, and unusually for Space Marine squad choices, you start out with just 2 of them in the base squad, and then you can upgrade to an additional 3 more, giving you a squad of 5. They have a pretty typical tactical marine profile, with the difference being that they have 2 attacks and leadership 8 at base, and the veteran sergeant being a further level above, having a mighty 3 attacks and leadership 9. At base they're equipped with a bolt pistol and chainsword, and frag and crack grenades, though their gear is very flexible. At base, each veteran will cost you 14 points per model, so if you did just take 2 of them, then that would be 28 points for an elite choice slot, and they are one of the cheaper options if you want to fill out a brigade, or just use an elite slot so you can field one of the Forge World relic datasheets. In terms of war gear options, the veteran sergeant can be equipped with 2 weapons from the veteran sergeant list. These again are incredibly flexible indeed, such as they have their special pistols such as grav and plasma pistols, bolt guns, all the combi weapons and storm bolters, and chainswords, power fists, lightning claws, and the mighty thunder hammer. It really depends on your role as to how you want to equip this guy. If you're just keeping a nice cheap squad, then having a storm bolter certainly isn't bad, but he does have 3 attacks, so things like power fists or thunder hammers have a lot more additional value here. It could be a choice for doing a reasonable amount of damage if you get him into close combat. The next options essentially allow them to swap out either their bolt pistol or chainsword for weapons from the melee weapons pistols list, combi weapons list, or special weapons list, which as far as I can tell makes the veteran sergeant options kind of redundant, as these options completely eclipse what he can take. It's interesting that you can deck the entire squad out with things like combi weapons or an entire squad of special weapons if you should want them. If you want to spam marines wielding plasma or melter or flamers, then this is one of the best ways to do so, as you can have an entire squad of the things. You can do likewise for combi weapons, and also the lovely storm bolter for just 2 points is as always a solid pick in my eyes. Finally, any model can trade out its bolt pistol or chainsword for a storm shield, which is a really nice option, and this really makes them a bit more unique over Stern Guard veterans, as Stern Guard veterans have the options to take the combi weapons and things, but can't take storm shields. The Vanguard veterans can take storm shields, but they can't take combi weapons. So I think that these guys have a really solid niche with combi weapons, special weapons and storm shields. Typically, if you're going to be giving them any sort of special kit, I'd also throw on a storm shield as well. Having a 3+ imbal save actually makes them durable, where having just their standard 3+ armour save and 1 wound is really not durable at all, particularly if you're giving them any special gear. In terms of special rules, they have Angels of Death, Shock Assault's great, Bolter Discipline could help out the Storm Bolters, and Combat Doctrines will help out their AP as per normal. They also have the Command Squad Bodyguard special rule, which is an interesting one. Basically, when a friendly chapter character model within 3 inches of the unit would lose any wounds as a result of an attack made against it, then the unit can attempt to intercept that attack. Roll 1d6, and on a 2+, that model does not lose those wounds, and the unit suffers 1 mortal wound for each of those wounds. So basically they work in a similar way to shield drones, by bouncing shots off from the character to hit these guys and keep the character safe. Now this is a very interesting rule, and it's one that can certainly help out. My main problem with it is that unlike say Tau shield drones that have the similar rule, these guys are a fair bit more expensive. Unless you pay to give them storm shields as well, then they're not all that durable. It does sort of mean that if they were about to shoot your character, it probably makes a lot more sense just to shoot the company veterans straight out, and not bother taking out the character until they're actually dead. However, I do think that they do have a niche against things like sniper weapons, but I would bear in mind that if your character was going to lose, say, 5 wounds to sniper weapons, then that would result in 5 wounds against these company veterans, meaning that they're pretty much going to be all dead unless they have any sort of feel no pain type shrug off save. So you can use them to stop the character getting shot, but you're really paying a premium for this, as it's going to be 14 points per wound lost. For some characters that might well be worth it, but for cheaper characters it wouldn't really be. So overall, they're a small and cheap squad. It's one of the easiest places to get multiple special weapons in, can take storm shields, and can be a good little unit to tailor to the exact niche that you want them to fill. So let's talk about getting a bit more out of them. For things like Ultramarines, then they're quite good for tanking wounds for their fairly expensive special characters. They might be particularly good at tanking a few wounds for Manius Calgar, as I believe that his half wounds inflicted on him rule would come into effect prior to them being able to bounce them, which could mean that you sort of save double the amount of wounds on Manius compared with other characters. Their moving and shooting with bolter discipline without penalty is also awesome on the storm bolters for these guys. A squad of 5 of them with storm bolters and storm shields will be putting out some very reliable strength 4 AP-1 firepower when in the tactical doctrine for fairly cheap. For Iron Hands, I think they could build quite well into the infantry castle list that they can do these days. Using Chief Apothecary and Father of the Future to give them a 5+ feel no pain has 2 benefits. First, it makes them a fair bit tougher, but also it means that if they do intercept any wounds from characters, then they can try and shrug it off in the same way that shield drones do with a 5+ feel no pain type rule. As far as I can tell as well, just by reading the rules, I can't see any reason why you couldn't use the Command Squad Bodyguard on a vehicle character as well, meaning that it could be a way to actually tank wounds for an Iron Hands Leviathan or something, just like they were doing with Cogitated Martyrdom in the past. 3 squads of these guys with Storm Shields and Storm Bolters are only 240 points, and that could give you a really annoying cadre of infantry to shrug wounds for the Leviathan, and give it that sheer unkillability that it had before. Please let me know if I'm getting any of the interactions wrong there, but as far as I can tell that's still legal, just a bit less efficient than the Intercessors doing it. For Salamanders, I think they could be an interesting unit in that you can load them all up with melter guns or with flamers. Salamanders' successors with flamers jumping in via drop pod could be interesting, or you could also give them combi flamers as well for a little bit of extra bolter shooting on top of that. Imperial Fists and Crimson Fists would likely like the Storm Bolters for the additional shots, and Crimson Fists in particular might favour the small squad sizes that you can get with these guys. Black Templars have a 5+ feel no pain type save against mortal wounds, and that's something that these guys will be able to make use of whenever they have a character mortal wound tank. Plus they might be a little bit easier to get into combat if they're deployed by drop pod or something, having those nice rerolls to charge. You can also use these guys with Blood Angels and Dark Angels. Dark Angels could be another way to get more plasma in your army if you want to be souping things up with weapons of the Dark Age. You could have 5 of these jump out of a rhino or a drop pod or something, ready to poke holes in something with damage 3 plasma. I'm not sure they necessarily compete quite as well with Vanguard veterans for things like Blood Angels and White Scars, who do a very similar thing. I think their niche is only really if you want to take the combi weapons and storm bolters, but it could mean that you could have a very hard hitting squad with both fancy power weapons and storm bolters if desired, if you want to leave those storm shields at home. In terms of character support, they'll obviously get rerolls from any of the relevant characters, but I think it's more going to be them supporting the characters by tanking wounds for them that's going to be the bigger deal. They're going to be best for any character that's got a very high points cost but a fairly low number of wounds, or just a character that's absolutely vital to your battle plan, say that Chief Apothecary in the Iron Hands Castle list for example. In general I wouldn't be looking to use too many stratagems on them, seeing as they're quite a small unit, unless there's something specific with plasmas for Dark Angels, or maybe melters or flamers for Salamanders, and you've really gone all in on giving them a decent amount of damage output. Transport options are interesting for the company veterans. I think they're one of the units that actually has the best synergy with drop pods. You could take 2 max units of these with Storm Bolters and Storm Shields, put them in a drop pod turn 1, and bring them down to unleash some close range bolter fire right from the get-go. And you could even make them a decent close combat threat as well by putting a Power Fist or Thunder Hammer on that 3 attack veteran sergeant. You could also change this round if you wanted different sorts of special weapons in there instead of just Storm Bolters. This is a pretty decent way of delivering special weapons. If not using drop pods, then Rhinos and Razorbacks are also fine. If you're trying to make some sort of old school Rhino rush list happen, then these guys can tote some special weapons well. So in terms of actually using these in game, as is often the case, I'm still a really big fan of Storm Bolters and Storm Shields. If you just wanted a few more durable objective scoring infantry, then including a couple of squads of 2 of them in a brigade could be a way to fill out slots very cheaply, give you a few extra anti-infantry shots, and put a few cheap, reasonably durable bodies on the table. I do quite like using some sort of drop pod based tactics, and I do think that they're one of the strongest units to put in drop pods if you're not doing something like the Grav Devastator pod, just because they can have both the durability of the storm shields and the firepower output of storm bolters or combi weapons. Finally, using them as just a barrier to keep your characters alive is perfectly reasonable as well. If you were doing this, I would either just use the storm shields and maybe a bolter, or perhaps pay the additional points for that storm bolter as well. I think that the reason that the shields are still needed is if you don't have the shields, they'll just be trivially removed with anti-infantry firepower. You need them to be durable enough so they're not targeted and your characters are taking wounds beforehand, and then they can actually use that tanking rule. In this sort of game, they can just accompany your characters around, doing whatever they're doing, and maybe spoiling your opponent's plans when they try and kill a crucial character with a bit of sniper fire or something. I think they're definitely more viable in this role in any army that can get them some sort of feel no pain type save, such as Iron Hands. Overall, I do really quite like the Company Veterans unit. I have used them a couple of times in the past. They can be a good cheap little unit for finishing off armies, as you can really have a very small unit and then just add more bodies with storm shields and storm bolters, which is rarely going to be a terrible choice. Beyond this, they can have some niche practical roles in delivering certain special weapons to the opponent if you're playing an army that excels with those, such as Salamanders. So if you've had any experience using these guys in the past, please let me know down in the comments below. I think they're a really interesting little unit just because of their flexibility, and if you've had any fun builds that you've used with them, please let me know, and whether or not you prefer them to Vanguards or Stern Guards. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe for more Space Marines and other 40k content coming out regularly. Auspex Tactics does usually have a 40k video coming out every single day. Finally, if you've been watching regularly and been enjoying the content, then any support on Patreon is greatly appreciated. It is what allows the channel to keep on making videos this quick, as it means that I can dedicate more time to the channel as opposed to my regular job. In addition to just supporting the creation of new videos, there's also other benefits for being a Patreon, such as seeing some videos early, voting on polls for the future of the channel, and getting access to special roles and chats in the Auspex Tactics Discord server if that's something that's interesting to you. If any of that's interesting, then the link's down in the description below, and of course a massive thank you to my current Patreons for making the channel possible. In any case, a big thank you for listening. I'll hope to see you guys next time.